Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we're honored to have a special guest, Bill Kieffer, who brings a wealth of experience and insight to our conversation. Bill has served nearly 12 years as a captain in the U.S. Army, where he was involved in pivotal operations like Operation Restore Hope in Somalia. But his journey didn't end there. After transitioning from the military, Bill carved out a highly successful 20-year career as an HR executive, leading global initiatives for major corporations. His leadership in HR has provided him with firsthand knowledge of the unique challenges veterans face as they transition into civilian life. Bill is also the founder of Veteran Career Journey, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to helping veterans build successful post-military careers while reducing the devastating impact of veteran suicide by empowering them with the tools for career success. Additionally, he's the author of 2 impactful books to guide veterans through a challenging transition. Today, Bill is going to share his incredible journey, transition challenges, and ongoing mission to help veterans successfully navigate their own path. So let's get ready to learn from a true strategic veteran about making an impact. Let's welcome Bill Kieffer to the show. Bill, great to have you here, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, man.
Yeah, dude. So let's jump right in, man. What inspired you to join the Army?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a family business. We had a long military history in my family. We tracked veterans back to the 1870s in the Dakotas, back when the cavalry scouts were out doing their thing. My granddad was actually a World War I infantryman and lived. My dad was a Korea War era doc who actually spent time in MASH units. Had an uncle, had an uncle that landed on Utah Beach on D-Day and lived. So it's always been. I had an uncle that was in the Coast Guard in like Greenland or something during World War II. So it was always just kind of something I wanted to do. And beyond the history, when I was a kid, I just thought that drill sergeant hat was cool as hell. So I thought, well, I'm going to join the military.
Yeah, the tour duty not so cool, but the hat's pretty cool.
Well, the hat was cool. Yeah.
So what did you end up doing in the Army?
So I was a logistics officer. Ordnance was my branch. And it was a funny time. I did the ROTC thing out of University of Toledo. They said, I don't know if you know the process, but they go, what branch do you want? I said, well, I want infantry. They go, great, you're going to be ordnance. I said, okay. Then later on, they said, where do you want to go? Now, bear in mind, this was 1985. Cold War's still going on. The Berlin Wall's still up. I said, well, send me to Berlin, man. They go, great, you're going to Fort Ord, California. I quit asking, man.
Right, seriously.
But yeah, so I was a logistics officer. Spent my first 2 tours out in light infantry divisions, 7th Infantry Division back, during the Panama days, and then went from there to the 10th Mountain Division. It did Hurricane Andrew, which timely given the weather on the day of recording here.
Right.
Yeah, did Hurricane Andrew relief? Yeah, no kidding. And then went on did Somalia. And after that, I got pulled by branch to go help rewrite and teach the logistics officer advanced course at Fort Lee, Virginia.
Where was 7th ID located when you were with
Fort Ord, California?
Oh, man. So then they go to Korea, and then they end up at Fort Lewis because I retired out of 7th ID.
Oh, did you really? Okay.
Yeah.
Fort Lewis.
Yeah. We reflagged from 2nd ID to 7th ID right after we came home from Afghanistan in 2012. Okay. Changed all the brigade numbers. I couldn't even tell you what they are anymore. But I part of 7th ID, this stupid fucking hourglass. The Indian head was way better.
It was kind of cool when I was there. 9th Infantry Regiment was headquartered with inside the 7th ID. And I primarily supported the 9th Infantry Regiment. And the colonel back then, a brigade regimental commander, was a guy named Hubo Vastazega, who was a tremendous guy. I mean, I was a nobody lieutenant, and he was an excellent leader. And in fact, I got the Manchu belt buckle. Still have it today.
You got the Manchu mile, man. How was that walk?
Oh, it was spectacular. Yeah, that was great. That's why I got my knees replaced,
So I want to talk about Operation Restore Hope in Somalia, because I think a lot of Somalia gets overshadowed by, obviously, Black Hawk Down and all of that. So what was that experience like, and how did it shape your understanding of leadership and kind of service, being there and participating in that operation?
Yeah, so it was impactful on a lot of levels. On the surface, if you listen to the media, we're going there as a humanitarian, anti-genocide food mission, basically, if you listen to the mainstream media. Yeah, well, I don't know. It didn't feel like that to me when people were shooting at us and when I was getting stoned in the streets of Mogadishu, and I don't mean I was smoking weed or chewing cot.
Right.
It was, physically stoned in um, so one of the things that hit me was how the reality on the ground is different from what gets portrayed to our citizenry. It's very
Mhm.
different. And I'm sure to some degree, there's really good reasons for it. Some of the stuff you've been around the world, some of the stuff when you get into these contested kind of situations, we'll say, gets ugly fast.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Uh, and a lot of the folks don't in the world don't need to hear all the details, and that's okay. So that hit me. The other thing that hit me is how, quite frankly, lack of resources and lack of leadership can impact the overall operation, the good order of the organization, individuals. I was a company commander at the time. I was also double-hatted for part of the time there as the battalion XO, and I had previously been the battalion 3. So I kept carrying a lot of balls in a lot of places, in a lot of ways. And I won't get into all the particular details, but we had some folks there that had maybe some leadership challenges. Um, and myself and a couple other folks were really working hard to try to overcome them on behalf of our troops and on behalf of the mission overall.
I'm so glad that you pointed that out because we've got a fucking 20-year case study to prove that leadership, shitty leadership, can perpetuate a situation, make things worse. And I can speak to that because I could walk you through the ROE changes that we went through from
Mhm.
my first deployment to my fourth deployment. And you'd be like, you had to do what in order to protect yourself? Like, yeah. So shitty leadership, politics, all that shit getting involved makes things exponentially worse. That's a whole nother rabbit hole that we can go down, but absolutely relate to what you're saying. And I'm glad you were one of the good ones out there trying to change policy to make things better for us lower enlisted guys.
Well, I certainly did the best I could. At the end of the day, this is all about, I mean, mission first, people always, right? We've heard about this over and over and over. It's a mantra that anybody in a leadership position has had drilled into them. And I absolutely, my core, believe it.
Mhm.
Um, but unfortunately, there are some folks that don't get either component of it.
Yeah, yeah. So in the questions you filled out to come on the show, you mentioned two pivotal moments in your career that left a lasting impression on you. You want to talk about those for a minute?
Yeah, well, certainly Restore Hope was one of them. That was, uh, beyond the obvious difficulties of that situation. It really, um, it gave me a master's class in how evil people can be and how little people can value life. I won't bore you with all the details. You've done 4 deployments, you've seen it. But I'll
It's
tell you what,
mind
man,
blowing. I'll tell you. I'm on the same
it,
page as you. It's absolutely mind blowing how another human being can value life so little and treat others the way that I know what you're talking about. I know
yeah,
exactly what you're talking about.
yeah. I mean, to my core, it changed me. Some ways not so good. I have lots of sleepless nights still. 31 years later, but it changed me in a good way too. It caused me to truly value and appreciate what we have here in America. Truly value and appreciate the blessings that we all enjoy, and caused me to, in some days that are challenging here in the world, to go, wait a minute, there's a whole lot worse places in the world. Let me help do the best I can to make this as good as it can be. And it's already better than a whole lot of places.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
what was the second one that left that impression on you as well?
Well, the other one was really my transition out, quite frankly.
Yeah,
Uh,
perfect. That's where we're headed next because
yeah,
that's the core of what you do now. It's
it
what
is.
I do. We're very much in alignment on these philosophies. So let's just go there. So 12 years comes up and it's time for Bill to get out of the army. Why did you decide to get out of the army?
Well, the work I do now talks about the veteran career journey. It's the name of my 501(c)(3). It's the title of the second book I wrote with Dave White. Um, that was the first time I realized that my life journey and my career journey aren't the same thing.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
I had a very cool career going on. We talked a little bit about it. I was on a promotion list of '04. Life was good. I had the right assignments. I knew the right people. Everything was going well. And then I unexpectedly went through a divorce. My life journey changed, and it impacted my career journey. Not only, and it caused me for the first time to go, wait a minute, I have to, there's a fork in the road here, and I have to pick one or the other. I could either, in my mind, have a great career that I always wanted, but not see my three then small kids, or I could walk away from the career I always wanted and be the best dad I could be, even though I probably was kind of screwed up, right? Um, I walked away from my career on a promotion list. Um, Heart wrenching moment, but somehow deep beyond beneath the pain and the anguish and the holy crap of it all, I knew it was the right thing to do. Um, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how to do it. I just knew there were two things I had to do, and one is get as close as I practically could to my kids and try and provide some kind of financial stability for the family. That was it. That's all I knew. And that's a scary place to start a transition from.
Well, but I think you touched on something there that a lot of us miss out on. I missed it when I started transitioning too, is that fucking fork in the road that you talked about, that gut check moment, like, who the fuck am I? Right?
Oh yeah.
And kudos to you for having enough self-awareness to realize you knew that your army journey, your career journey, and your life journey weren't the same thing. You had distinguished that those two were separate. I did not do that. I was a 17-year-old kid when I joined the Army. I was a 30-year-old kid when I got out, because the Army doesn't teach you how to be an adult. No matter how much you think about it, the Army always tells you when to eat, sleep, shit, work, whatever. You're
Yep.
bound to the Army, so you don't have to think for yourself. And that's really easy. At least for me, it was really easy to become caught up in that and associate that with my identity. And you didn't do that, which I think is a great start to your transition.
Well, let's
However,
not mischaracterize it. I can call it what I call it now in hindsight. Oh, I was all kind of screwed up when I got.
yeah, and then and obviously that's where we're going next, because you didn't know how you're going to make money, you didn't know how you're going to support the kids that you've got. You're divorced now, or going through the divorce, whatever that looks like. I've been through two of them, so I know, right? Like, that's fucking painful. So what were some more obstacles that I already know these because I do this all day, every day, but
Mhm.
like, really driving the point home to those that listen over almost 60 episodes of this now, like what are those obstacles that you had to get over? Maybe you didn't realize them at the time, maybe you couldn't have accounted for them at the time. Obviously, we're speaking from a foresight standpoint here, but what are those things that people should be watching out for that you very much had to go through?
Well, and you kind of touched on it. You got to decide who you are without the uniform. Now, how do you decide that that's kind of the work I do and the work you do and helping people figure out how to get from here to there? Who is Bill?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, the answer right out of the gate was, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I identified as a green suit guy. That was it. That's what I do. That's who I am. And the interesting part, now let me digress just a little bit. My dad was a physician, right? And he was Dr. Kiefer for his entire adult life. He practiced medicine actively for 50 years. And then he turned in his license and retired. And when he was, everybody still called him Doc, but when he wasn't doctoring, he had no identity.
Yeah.
He went through the same thing you went through in transition. I went through in transition when he was, I don't know, 75 years old, and he never recovered from it. He just shut down. So, in a way, as hard as it was, and as painful as it was, and as confusing as it was, I'm really glad it happened when I was young. So I wasn't an old tired man going, well, who the hell am I now? Now that I can't walk and all that stuff,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that transition from whatever your identity is based on career, it happens to everybody at some point. In hindsight, I look at it and go, you know what? I'm glad it happened when it did, because
Mm-hmm.
it forced me to face a world without the title, the uniform, the trappings of being a military member, okay, or in my dad's case, a physician, or whatever you were, right? Um, the next big challenge is I didn't know how to engage with civilians. No, I
Right.
didn't. I'm
That's a
not trying.
big one. That's a big one.
Huge. huge. I mean, not that I couldn't hang out with civilian people,
No. But
although it was different.
from a professional standpoint, right? We're vulgar. We operate on 1,000,001 acronyms. You know, everything out of your mouth, at least for me, when I first got out, was still an acronym. Everything was an acronym. Trying to talk to people in the professional world, they're like, "You got to slow down and understand what you're saying. And I'm never going to get it." Like, you are not in the military anymore. You can't talk to me like this. And like, we're not taught any different.
Right.
Like, you know.
Yeah. I came out, a quick story, one of my early interviews, I was talking to the employer, and, we're doing okay. And I was nervous because it was a really early interview and I blew the interview. But they were like, "Well, what'd you do in the military?" And I enthusiastically said, "Well, I was a 90 Alpha 5 Papa 3 Romeo."
Yeah.
And you know how German Shepherds tilt their head?
Yep.
They kind of tilted their head. They were like, "What?" So I said, "Let me help." I said I was a tactical multifunctional logistics officer that was airborne, qualified, nuclear, biological, and chemical certified. And they go, "Doesn't
Still don't
help."
know what that means. Right.
Still don't know what that means. And what I realized over time, and when I coach people, I talk to them about this. Listen to the question that the people are asking, not the words they're saying.
Right.
Because the real question that employer was asking wasn't, "What'd you do in the military?"
It's what
It's,
skills
"What
do you
did you
have that
do in the
translate? Yeah.
military that's relevant to what I need?"
Yeah.
That's what they're asking. I didn't know. So I stumbled all over that one and, screwed it up. I might have made that mistake a couple of times before I figured it out. Okay. But you got to understand who you are without the uniform. You got to understand how to engage with civilian folks, civilian employers in the context of what we're talking about here. You got to understand what you're bringing to the party. What are those capabilities, experiences, passions that you bring to the world that might be interesting, intriguing, or valuable to others, professionally, personally, whatever? And the third part you really need to know is, how do you define success? Because
Yes.
for the first time in your adult life, you get to define success. Remember the story I told earlier? Hey, I want to be infantry, you're ordnance. Hey, I want to go to Berlin, you're going to, Fort Ord. There is no assignments branch. There is no detailer. There's nobody sitting there managing your career and laughing about the fact that you're not going to get what you want. You now have the luxury of almost unlimited choices and the burden of having to make the choice. So it's really different. The whole thing lies on your shoulders now.
Well, and this is an important point, because this is where, again, we get it wrong as veterans when we're transitioning out. And that assignments branch really in our minds just translates to society's definition of what the fuck you should be doing when you get out. Right? Like, you have to play in this certain, for example, if you just take the ACAP process, is what it was called when I got out. I don't know what it was when you got out. It's changed again since I've gotten out. But the transition, the mandatory transition program that you have to go through from the military, and I've heard by and large from every branch, to include the Coast Guard, that it's shit. It's still shit. It's probably always going to be shit. It's a large part of why I have what I have, because my end goal is to be a skill bridge program that actually understands transition and puts in place these things, so a year or 6 months before you get out, I can help you transition well. You know what I mean? But I digress on that. But I do think that that's an important part, because we write a resume, use your GI Bill, get a degree, and go apply to corporate jobs, and that's the path forward for you. That's what society says you should do. That's what the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, the Space Force, they all tell you to do that. You don't have to do that at all. You like Bill just said, you absolutely have infinity choices. Anything that you want to do, you can make that happen. You just have to sit with yourself for a fucking minute and understand, okay, this is what I really want to be doing, because this is what I'm passionate about. How do I get there?
Absolutely. And doing that work, what do I want to do? I like? Well, let me back up a second here. I like to coach guys using a triangle, right? I don't have the rights to Dark Side of the Moon from Pink Floyd, but I have that visual, right? It's a little prism. Okay. And on the one side of the prism, you think about what those things are that you're passionate about. Unicorns and rainbows and lollipops, that's fine. But what are you passionate about enough to get up and do the hard work? What are you passionate about to put forth the extra effort to get you wherever that is, right? So write them down. Crayons, post-it notes, I don't care how you do it. There's value in documenting them, right? Then you look at the other side of the triangle and go, what am I capable of? What am I good at? not just in your current billet in the military, not just based on your pay. What am I good at? Let's say you're a medic in the Marine Corps, but you happen to be a good welder. Write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What if you happen to be good at public speaking or decision making or programming or JavaScript, whatever, right? Write it down and then look at the bottom of the triangle. And that's the practical realities of your situation. Okay. What do I want? What am I good at? And what are the practical realities? I tell people if you love fishing and you're good at fishing for tuna, but you live on Lake Erie, you got to make some different decisions.
That's a good.
Okay?
Your triangle analogy is basically how my mentor helped me figure out what I wanted to do or where I was going with the ikigai, right? The circles,
Yeah.
wherever, and same philosophy, and
Yep.
works so well. I didn't even have to finish filling it out before I knew what direction I was going to go. Right? I knew that I loved being a leader. I knew that I never gave myself enough credit for how good I was at leadership, but I
Mhm.
knew that I loved it and I knew that I had been told that I was good at it. So I ran with it and I looked at where I was. I'm still up in Washington by Fort Lewis, right? Here I'm down by the Space Force base, no big deal. The internet's a large place. I can be a leader. I always knew I wanted to be a leader soldier still. I just kind of finagled my way into now I get to be a leader of all of them, which is
Right.
really cool. So a prime example, right? Leadership, and now I get to lead in a space that means the world to me, right? So good
Right.
example.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great example. It's funny, and I'm going to digress again a little bit. This topic of leadership, I've worked with so many people over the years that come out of the military. Kind of your E7 to E7 to E9, 04 to 06. They go, I said, what's your biggest asset? What's your biggest thing you bring? And they go, leadership. I go, of what?
Mm.
Because if you can't answer the of what in a way that's relevant to the employer you want to join with, leadership doesn't make the list.
Well, and that's leadership 101
Okay?
because
It is, yeah.
like I was offered instead of being med boarded out, I was offered the MMRB, right? I'm
Mhm.
a senior staff sergeant on the list to be promoted to E7. That would have never happened. Like my sequence number, I would have been fucked, but whatever, it doesn't matter. They're offering me an MMRB. So, okay, I've got 12 and a half years as an infantryman. You want me to pen E7, change MOSs, and be an effective senior non-commissioned officer in another
Yeah,
branch?
yeah.
Like, no thanks. That's not the definition of a leader. I can't do that. I cannot do that because now I'm going to have E1s to E6s coming to me, expecting me to be a subject matter expert and a leader
Yep,
at this position.
yep.
My background is 12 and a half years of war as an infantryman, not 12 and a half years as an intel guy or a linguist or whatever the hell I would have qualified to go and be. And so I'm so glad that you touch on that because
Yeah.
leadership of what?
Yeah, so
you know
think about that in the context of civilian employment when you transition out. It's the exact same thing. I like to tell people there's the three C's you got to balance: confidence, capability, and
Of course,
as
you're
soon
going
as
to
I'm
forget it.
yeah, of course, when people believe in you, credibility,
There you
credibility,
go.
capability, confidence, and credibility, right? You're highly capable in leadership. The likelihood is that even if you branch transfer or got out of the military and went to work in a leader position at, Amazon, Google, XYZ company, whatever, likely you would be successful. That's capability. Okay. But how credible are you?
You're
Credibility
really.
has to be earned, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of where you were going with your point. So it's a challenge that folks have to have in career transition when they're coming to a civilian employer to start establishing at least some potential for credibility on the job, enough to get the offer. And as soon as you get there, you better start performing because your credibility is being checked every day. And it'll grow over time if you perform well in the context of the work environment you're in.
Right. I love that, man. So what process did you go through to sit down, figure out who you are, and then land on your feet in the HR space in corporate America?
So, this is probably why I'm so passionate about it. I stumbled and tripped and fell. I made puppy dog mistakes. The puppy dog thing, they get all excited and they go running into things and land in the cabinet head first. Yeah. So I didn't do this clean, but I learned over time what I did wrong and how to get it right. Um, I just started applying for jobs. Now, back when I got out, there was no Indeed, there was no LinkedIn. I mean, I was reading newspapers and going to the phone book and knocking on doors.
Like those
It
old
was
80 movies where you're circling job
exactly
opportunities
100%.
in the paper while you're drinking your coffee and eating your breakfast. Put your
Absolutely.
suit and tie on, grab your briefcase out the door to go drive
Absolutely.
around and apply to job. I love that, man, because
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, when I got out of the Army, I landed several jobs doing that the old school way. Printed my
Yep.
resume off, drove to in the insurance industry, drove to all the big box stores, and to my surprise, came away with like 5 job offers in the
Yeah.
same day. Right? Like, it's
Yeah.
powerful stuff. So get out of your own
Yeah.
way and do it.
Well, okay, let's talk about that a little bit. And why is that so effective? It's because people hire people.
Right.
Study after study after study will tell you that only about 5% of salaried professional jobs, the kinds that we're generally talking about, get landed by applying online. Over 80% get landed by networking.
Yeah.
And the remainder, the difference is some combination of those two things, right?
That's my favorite part, is the
Your
networking
uncle
part.
owned the company, right? Now, I'm a huge introvert. I have learned to do what I do. When I first got out, not only was I looking in the rearview mirror, bemoaning the past, not only was I screwed up because of the divorce, not only did I have issues from coming back from Somalia, I don't like going, I like it now. I didn't like going out and introducing myself to strangers, right? Partly because it's just my nature, and partly I didn't know what to say. Hi, I'm Bill. Can I have a job? Ooh, that's compelling.
Right.
So, yeah, I had to figure. In hindsight, I had to give myself the grace to fail forward. That
I
phrase,
love
fail
that.
forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I use it all the time.
Yeah. So, I go out and I screwed something up. Whatever it was, I said something wrong in an interview. I was a 90 Alpha 5 Papa 3 wrong. I mean, whatever it was, right? Rather than crush myself with criticism and being really harsh, going, okay, well, that didn't go well. I reach back and do an after action review. What was the intent? What was
So
the
perfect.
result? What happened? What was the gap? Why did it go wrong? And how do I change it in the future?
Well, and by
Right?
doing that, it also allows you to not hang on to, well, I blew that one. I'm a fucking piece of shit. Like, this is never going to happen for me. It just allowed you to be like, okay, well, we'll on to the next one. We'll try harder at the next one, and we'll learn lessons from that one. And then, before you know it, you're landing in your feet in an HR role.
Yeah. The other thing that I ran into is I thought that any opportunity I got would be the only one I'd ever get. So, man, I hung onto that baby until I squoze the life out of it, right? And that's ridiculous. I only know that now in hindsight, right? The world is full of opportunity. I mean, it's just, full of opportunity.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of let your eyes and ears stay open to what's out there. Wow, how might that work? And not get so hung up on one opportunity that you strangle it to death,
Such great advice, because as I'm finding out now, like, doing what I've done and building what I'm building and all of that has opened so many doors and opportunities I didn't know existed. And I agree with you. Opportunity is abundant. It is everywhere. The biggest problem I have now is learning how to say no to opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and that's a whole nother monster in itself, because we're wired, particularly if you had an upbringing like mine, where you don't come from any kind of money, where you're wondering, from time to time, where food's going to come from. You're getting clothes, hand-me-downs, or from the Goodwill. Opportunity becomes one of those things that you want to hang on to, because you don't know any better. You don't know that the world is full of so much even better opportunity than what's in front of you. And so I battle that constantly, particularly in this stage of where I'm at, because they're coming at me daily. I have opportunity. And it's like, yeah, absolutely not working with you. Don't want to get involved with that at all. Some of them are very obvious. Some of them are like, I have to take a minute. I might jump and find out, like, yeah, this is definitely not for me. Sorry, I'm out. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and the other piece of that in my experience is, once you've said no, I mean, you be polite, you be professional, you say no and move on. And then whatever that was turns into something great. Don't kick yourself for missing the boat. You go, oh, good for them, but I'm on my journey.
No, because there's definitely a reason that you're saying no at the time, and you can't hang on to that, because it wouldn't have panned out the way that you're seeing it pan out now if you had said yes. You said no for a reason. There's an intuition that we all have, it, and we choose to ignore it a lot of the times, I think. And I'm really learning how to trust, my gut, if you will, and it's really paying off for me.
Well, you just said a really important thing. When we're in uniform, we trust the system. Now, we all have good and bad experiences, but overall, we trust the process, we trust the system, we trust the organization. We had to trust ourselves to a certain degree, but we were able to work from a foundation of trust in the machine. And then all of a sudden, the machine's gone.
Right.
And you focused on the processes, the practices, the tools, the techniques, the people that you trusted, and they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
You really didn't have to trust yourself in the same way as much.
Right.
And you're doing that in a context that is entirely new.
Mm-hmm.
You hadn't been in career transition before.
Ever.
When you made the transition into the military, yes, that's a transition, but that's a transition into something that's very structured, that's very well done. It's been built, grown, developed, and employed for generations, and everything around you is there to help you succeed.
Right.
That's entirely different than career transition. Because but for the network you build, you're on your own.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, and TAP or ACAP or whatever they're calling it these days, and I had similar experience. 99.99, however many percent of the people I've dealt with over the last long time, many years, have said, yeah, no, it's not helpful. It's better at doing the transactional, technical, tactical stuff on getting me out than it is on helping me enter the new world well. Hey, there's LinkedIn. This is Indeed. Here's 3 tips on how to do a LinkedIn profile, 2 formats for a resume. Good luck, Godspeed. Don't forget to call the VA.
Yeah, and largely those tips for LinkedIn are bullshit. They don't work.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's an interesting dilemma, but you're kind of on your own. That's why I tell people, I don't know who I was talking to a while ago, but they said, when do you start thinking about your transition out? I said, about the day after you sign the contract to come in.
That was me you were talking to in our first meeting.
Yeah.
I will never forget you saying that, because to me, that's really powerful. We went on from that meeting, and I had somebody else on the podcast. It hasn't aired yet, but they very much carried that attitude when they joined. So their transition was not nearly as a detriment to them when they got out, because they carried that attitude their whole time. He very much knew the Army will end at some point. I need to be preparing along the way. He ended up doing like 28 years, but still, if you carry that attitude for 28 years, knowing the things I know now, particularly with my favorite thing in the whole world, which you just hit on in networking. If I would have just built a network for my 12 and a half years in the Army, there's no telling where I'd be right now. If I truly understood the power of a network, and like if I had somebody to explain to me that networking is not just shaking hands and being polite, but it's actually building genuine connections and understanding that you may not be able to use that connection right now, but you can put it in your back pocket for later and reach back out to that connection to leverage it in the future, I would have been way further along than I am right now.
100%. Now, that's not dissimilar to your civilian counterparts. Okay. A lot of them, they go, okay, well, I got this job and it is what it is. They, by their very nature, have to be a little more skilled at the network because they don't have the machine behind them.
Right.
Right. But let's talk. Can we talk about networking a little bit?
Dude, we can talk about that. This is my favorite thing, particularly because I meet so many people and they compliment me on my networking skills. They tell me I'm a super connector. They tell me that it's largely why I've leaned into it, is because I didn't know you can make money just building a network. Like that can be a profession.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot of different definitions of networking out there, and some of them get real academic and some of them get kind of abstract. I like to keep a really simple definition of networking. In my mind, networking is nothing more than a conversation with a purpose.
Correct.
That's it, full stop. Right. And I think when people get to that kind of a definition, it helps kind of ease the emotional strain some. It's like, oh, I'm just having a conversation with well, what is my purpose? Well, as a person in career transition or job search, your purpose is to land a job, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the overarching, that's the mission, if you will, right? But what's your purpose for that engagement?
Right.
Perhaps your purpose is just to get familiar shaking a stranger's hand.
Yep.
Or maybe your purpose that day is to practice your elevator pitch, your personal pitch. Or maybe your purpose is to talk to a specific person about a specific opportunity. It matters little what the purpose is. It matters more that you have some definition of it before you engage in the activity. So you don't walk in there just starting to babble and, kind of nice, happy talk. And that's great, but you didn't get anywhere. Right.
Often my purpose is somebody has a skill that I want and I want to know how they acquired it.
Sure. Sure. So whatever it happens to be, I suggest people take a few minutes and do a little mission planning beforehand. Right? Okay, I'm going to go to this event, and I know it's a job fair, and I know there's 6 employers that I'm really interested in because I saw the jobs. I want to go to the table and I want to ask about those jobs, express my interest, and hand off a resume. Great. What about the rest of the people there? What's your purpose for all of them? Well, maybe some of the other folks is shaking hands with a stranger, whatever it is. But take some time and do just some even cursory little mission planning before you engage in the networking activity so you know what you're getting yourself into, right? Now, a lot of folks think networking is manipulation. Yeah, I don't want to do it because it just feels kind of slimy, you know?
Yeah. I'm not sure what's slimy about it though. Like I feel like those people who think it's manipulation or slimy feel they probably don't realize that they have value as well and that they're bringing value to that other person regardless of whether
Exactly.
you can put your finger on it or not. It's the same thing I teach inside of the stronghold in the networking course because I I'm just naturally good at it. I know that's kind of tooting my own horn or egotistical. I'm not trying to be that way because I tried to figure out like people ask me, you're so good at the networking piece. Can you teach me? And I really struggled with that because it just comes natural to me. And so I really had to sit down and break it down. And I like started breaking it down. And I was like, this is overcomplicated. It doesn't have to be this complicated. It's
Right.
really a couple of things like, what is your intention with that conversation?
That's the
Like,
magic word. That's
yeah,
the magic word right there. The
the
difference
intention.
between manipulation and networking is intent.
Yeah.
If your intent is to take yours and screw the other guy, well, that's manipulation. That's wrong. But if your intent, and man, you nailed it, man. This is great. If your intent is to open the door, share your ask, and offer your support, whatever that might be to the other, that's networking.
And I'll even
100%.
give you an example. When I started building on LinkedIn, anybody who commented on anything that I posted or anybody who sent me a connection request or accepted a connection request, I would send them a 1-minute Loom video introducing myself, thanking them for their connection, that I was grateful for it. And then I would just simply end it with, I don't know how I can help you, but if there's ever anything I can do to help you improve your
Yep.
situation, please reach out to me. I can't tell you how far that went for me.
Oh, absolutely.
And so when I was writing my networking course that's in the stronghold, shameless plug here, I was like, this is way overcomplicated. You look online and you get all the textbook bullshit definitions. It's
Yep.
the intention behind the conversation, and then it's understanding that you're going into that conversation whether you realize it or not, that you have something valuable to give this other person. I'm guilty
100%.
of the imposter syndrome myself. I'm guilty. When I first started, I didn't have an offer. I didn't know what direction I was headed. I didn't think that I could be valuable to people. I quickly got turned on my head and proven way wrong in that because I ended up being way more valuable to people, even though I thought I knew nothing.
Yep. That 100%. 100%. And I wish more of our service members, our veterans that are in transition, and even civilians that are in job search and transition, I wish they understood that. You know, your perception, your personal perception of potentially low value, 9 times out of 10 is just wrong.
Flat wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%, dude.
I love this, man. So, in your 20 plus year career in the HR field, I assume that informed a lot of you founding Veteran Career Journey. And so, what were you seeing in the HR world out there in corporate America that really compelled you to start Veteran Career Journey?
Oh, two things. One is I saw too many veterans struggling. Before I started VCJ and my for-profit company, Kiefer and Associates, I saw too many. I worked with a lot of veterans informally. Somebody, hey, my nephew got out, my uncle just got out. You're a vet. Can you talk to them? And so I've been doing this a really long time, right? And what I found was on the veteran side of things we talked about, they have no idea who they are, what they're bringing to the party, how they define success, or how to interact with businesses, and what the norms and expectations are in the civilian work world, right? And that led to all kinds of trouble: underemployment, extended transition period, financial troubles, family troubles, and unfortunately up to and including veteran suicide. On the business side of things, I saw business results suboptimized because 93% of the population never served in uniform. And those folks in the business world had no idea how to engage with a veteran. So key jobs go unfilled far longer because they're trying to go to the same old talent sources. And they go, well, I don't know anything about veterans, so I'm not even going to try and tap the market. Like, well,
So I'm
okay,
curious,
but
why do you think that is? Why do they not engage with veterans? Why are they afraid to talk to veterans? Because I'm very interested in that side of things, because I definitely understand it from the veteran to the corporate side of things. Like, it's very
Mhm.
obvious to me having served, but I don't understand. I'm a victim of a lot of, a couple of corporations hired me when I got out just for the tax breaks of looking good and hiring
Absolutely.
veterans, right? Like, that's
Absolutely. Yep.
the most shady thing you can do as a corporation. We're not going to name any names. I'm not going to name drop. I don't do that on this podcast, but
Right.
it's important for me to understand, because I think having the whole picture, not just seeing it from the veteran side, but seeing it from the corporation side too. Why do you think that is, that they don't engage with veterans? Are they afraid of us?
Because it's not. No, I don't think it's afraid of veterans, although biased. We can talk about that. Human beings are naturally, prone to avoid that which they don't understand. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and if you look at the lifestyle, the culture of the military, it's very different than most of the civilian world. And when 93% of the population has never served in uniform and only about 1% join now, that number is
Mm-hmm.
only going to get worse, right? Um, we're foreign entities to them. And when people are really busy, they err to the familiar. Okay.
Ah, so
They
it's just
err to the
it's
familiar.
almost a default response for them
It's a
because,
default
oh,
because I'm
got it.
already busy. I don't have the time or mental energy to go figure out how to go do that. I've seen it
Right.
over and over and over. It's like, look, we got great access. I can coach you on how to get from here to there, working with HR leaders. Here's who we can contact. Let's open the doors to county veteran service agencies, so on and so on and so on and so on. And they're like, I'm already smoked. I don't have time to go figure out something new and different. I think there's an underappreciation, quite frankly, on of the hard work that a lot of people in the civilian world do. And I'll speak now specifically to folks in the recruiting and talent acquisition world. I led a couple departments that did talent acquisition in multi-billion-dollar company. And I'll tell you what, it's a miserable job.
Mm-hmm.
It's a miserable job. Now, there are people that love it and they're great at it, and thank God for them, man. You've got hiring managers that are demanding great people to fill their seats, but they can't tell you what great looks like. And when you don't fill that seat before they asked for it, you're already late.
Right.
And then when you bring qualified candidates on paper, the hiring manager, for some reason, can't make the interview, or if he can make the interview, just, I don't like them. Not a fit. Well, guess what? Not my job to make that decision. It is a thankless job. So you see well-intended, highly capable people, in most cases, um, working hard and kind of spinning in the sand a little bit. You've run in the sand with a heavy load. You know how that goes, right?
It's
It's
my favorite.
kind,
It's my
yeah,
favorite.
good for you.
No, it's
It's
not.
kind of the business equivalent, right? And now we're going to say, hey, instead of you're going to keep doing that for all the other streams of talent, but you need to do this new thing too, and you got to learn how to do it. I think that's the bulk of it. I don't think the bulk of the problem is bad intent or fear. People are just overworked and they don't have the time or energy to go try something new because there
Yeah.
is no guaranteed bingo at the other end.
Yeah. So talk to us about Veterans Career Journey. What is the program? How are you helping veterans land more successful jobs? Walk us through that process, all of it, top to bottom. I'm super interested in this because whether you know it or not, you're an inspiration to me with what I'm trying to do with a strategic veteran. I think I can learn a lot from you selfishly. That's why I have this podcast, because it's like a masterclass every time I get to talk to a new entrepreneur. But I really do think it's important work, man, because I don't want people to have to go through 8.5 years of what I did, seek out plant medicine to really figure out who you are, because you're so far into that, what I call the transition hole. I know you've probably heard me say that a time or two. I really want people to understand like how important the work you and I are doing is, why it matters, and how it's helping veterans.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Our mission is to close the culture gap between veterans and civilian employers and to help reduce veteran suicide, right? And the way we do that is by providing practical, no nonsense insights to what the civilian employment world is really like. Okay. My first book is 151 Insights, Military Career Transition, Insights from the Employer's Side of the Desk. I call it Intelligence Prep of the Career Battlefield. Okay. So our service members and more recent veterans, I hope more recent ones, have some idea of the norms and expectations, realities of the civilian workplace before they drop in and land on that LZ.
Yeah.
Okay. So they have some idea of what they're getting into and they can begin to prepare themselves. We in the military experience, we train, then we deploy, then we refit, then we train, then we deploy, right? That's how that works.
Sometimes we
Then
don't even refit. We just go back to train and deploy.
Yeah, correct, correct. And that cycle doesn't exist in the civilian world, right? The train up because you're deploying into a new civilian world, right? Let's use that metaphor, right?
Yeah.
What are you doing to train up for it? Veteran Career Journey's mission is to help our veterans, our service members, and spouses get trained up before they land there. Okay. We do it by trying to provide books to folks that need the books, and we're this close. I'm just doing the scheduling now to actually providing online training courses. I call it the Transition Basics, which is based on the first book, Getting Ready to Transition, covering the key points of those 150, not all 151, but key points of those 151 insights. That's the first course. The second course, we're just calling it Transition 201, is what do you do when you land? It's based on the second book, which is titled Veteran Career Journey, More Insights from the Employer Side of the Desk. The idea there is to remind folks that getting a job offer and starting that next new job isn't the end of the journey. It's the next leg of the journey. And you've
Yeah.
got to make sure you land well and identifies the who's and the what's around. And then after that relatively short period, you got to spend a little bit more time, several months, maybe a year, integrating well to really learn the who's, the what's, the why's, and the how's. So you can get on to the third phase of a career journey, which is thriving and surviving in the long run. So you can leverage all the opportunities you see, all the experience you've had, everything you've identified and learned to maximize your career and life journey success. Okay, so that's the courses. Our target right now is online training. And I'm, like I said, in fact, hopefully I have a call yet this afternoon with my IT guy to go, how do I make this work so I can get everybody registered and do all that stuff? Content's built. It's just a matter of figuring out how to deploy it. And then once the fundraising gets up high enough, our aspiration is to go around on or near military installations in CONUS to deliver these training classes hands on. So that's
Dude.
that's what we're trying to go. That's what we're trying to do. And I'm absolutely passionate about it because I've seen too many people fight too hard to be successful in the transition and fight too hard once they've landed to be successful in the long run. It doesn't have to be that hard. It really doesn't.
No, and by doing that, you avoid a lot of the burnout, the misery that comes with, you could land in a perfect spot, but because you have no idea how to adapt to that spot, you could quickly burn out and become, I hate to use this term, but mentally ill and start facing those challenges, like be a statistic that we're both out here trying to prevent. And I think the
Absolutely.
work that you're doing is amazing, man. Any numbers on how many veterans you've helped thus far?
Oh my God.
No, I take that as a lot.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, we number it in the thousands. It's not in the dozens.
I love it.
To varying degrees. Okay. Some of that's direct coaching one-on-one extended over time. Some of it's by delivering training classes. Some of it's by, speaking engagements. Some of it's just informal calls over a, cup of coffee or, maybe a beer too. But, so yeah, it's in the thousands.
Let's talk about Kiefer and Associates. Do you do the same thing on the for-profit side that you're doing on the nonprofit side?
I do, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Kiefer and Associates has been in place for 6 years. Okay, and veteran career transition is a piece of it, I also focus on doing more of the strategic HR work that I did in the civilian world. My focus there is more on the employer side of things, helping employers get a little bit more savvy about veterans, helping them understand what to do with veterans.
So this is an
And
awesome. I like this because I've talked to several people over the course of this show who, but some of them are doing the same kind of work as helping companies stand up veteran resource programs and teaching them how to, basically the opposite of what you're doing with VCJ,
Mhm, mhm.
just for the employer. And I think that's amazing because that's what it's going to take to really integrate fully with one another and just make it that seamless transition is like education on both sides.
Well, it does, and a lot of my work in that regard is working with human resource professionals, hiring managers, and so forth, just to understand a little bit more about veterans, the capability they bring, and um, talk about various ways they can improve what they're doing. Resource groups is one strategy that they could take, but just letting them know the veterans are out here, and we're not all nuts, we're not all dangerous, and we're not all going to be health insurance cost risks if you
Right.
hire us. You know,
One, I think like I hope you're working on this, but one important thing is making them understand that VA appointments should not be charged PTO for that veteran because he can't just reschedule it. You're just kind of at the mercy of when the VA schedules you. And I'm speaking from experience because I had two companies in my life. One was, and I will name drop, Toyota of Olympia. I got hired to sell cars with them, and I had a neuro appointment with the VA the same day training was supposed to start, and they weren't willing to accommodate me. I said, "Fuck you, I'm not going to work here then."
yeah,
And then
yeah.
another one, several years later, I was like, "Hey man, I've got to go to this dentist appointment. I made this bitch like 9 months ago, and today's the day." And he's like, "You're gonna have to take a whole day of PTO if you want to go to that." And I'm like, "I have to take a day of PTO to go to a Veterans Affairs appointment."
Mhm.
And he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." I was like, "But you didn't make Guy over here take a day of PTO to go to his fucking, whatever appointment he had yesterday."
Right, right,
It's like,
right.
really, really, we're
Yeah,
gonna do this,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the other bit is people come in and they have, even if it's not official company policy, there is in fact some bias out there against the military. Not everybody loves the military, and not everybody loves veterans, right? And I try to work with civilian employers that are willing to engage and hear it to help them understand that this bias, that's not the veteran's fault. That's your employee's fault. That's your hiring manager's fault, and you need to figure out how to get them past it. And if you can't, then don't try and engage in veteran hiring because it's just going to be a shit show down line, right?
What are these biases you're seeing in those companies, and why do you think they don't like veterans?
Well, some people just personal perspective, they just don't like veterans. Some of that comes from maybe political stances, whatever. Some of it's because they had a family member that had a bad experience, and a lot of it, quite frankly, comes from the news and the media. And people watch, uh, uh, the worst kind of movies about veterans, or they see a little bit about basic training, and they go, "Oh my God, all you do is follow orders, and we need people that are independent thinkers." And veterans are all there's so many instances of PTSD, they're all a risk, and it's all a I had a boss one time. I'll tell you another quick story. I had a
Yeah,
boss one time,
absolutely.
not a veteran. Nobody in his family were veterans. He had a son. The son's not a veteran, and this is a very senior guy at a big company. And he was always very appreciative of my military service. On our senior leadership team, I was the only veteran. Okay, the only one. And happy Veterans Day. Thanks for. I understand. This is 20 years post Black Hawk Down. Really appreciate your time in Somalia. Blah blah blah. Right. But he never got it. Got it. He came
He's
in
just
one
checking the
time.
block by saying that stuff.
Well, it was well intended. It just he didn't understand it. He had great intent. I think he was genuine. One time we shut down the week between Christmas and New Year's, and one year after the New Year or the Christmas break, he came back in and he kind of rush into my office, but he came in pretty excited. He goes, "Bill, I get it." What? I don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah. He goes, "I understand your veteran experience." And my first thought was, "Oh God,
No,
this
you
is going
don't.
to be good."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, boss, how did you come to that revelation?" He said, my son and I binge watched Band of Brothers over the Christmas break. I said, well, I appreciate that. That was 50 years before my time on an entirely different continent in an entirely different army, but thanks for trying.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sad to me that people would hold those, like, we're not all out here. PTSD TBI right here, 70% of my rating for that, right? But you're
Yep.
not. I'm not what the media is portraying or Hollywood's portraying about a soldier with PTSD. And by and large, yeah, I could have very easily ended up that way. You know, 4
Yep.
combat deployments as an infantryman, like, I've seen and done the worst of the worst, right? Like, there's no secrets there. You know, we all did. There's several thousand of me out there that have been there and done that. And by and large, we are all figuring it out. You know what I mean? It sucks, man.
So at one point, I hired a recently retired Army lieutenant colonel. He was an adjutant general, an HR guy for the Army, right? Great guy, really good dude, field HR guy, which is kind of rare sometimes, you know. Hired him to be our training manager, and he came in and was doing a good job. He took on good projects and was learning how to communicate with civilians, and kind of not perfect, but good intent and trying real hard and learning and making progress on the assigned projects. And they were big projects. We're at the annual succession planning meeting, right? Which who's going to be the next vice president of this or that, right? And I wrote the program for the entire global company. So I know exactly how this is going to work, right? It's supposed to work. Well, we're having the discussion about my successor. Okay. And I said, well, let's call him Fred. Well, it's Fred. 2 of my colleagues, both vice presidents of HR, said, absolutely not. I said, why? They said, because he's not from the industry. I go, neither was I.
And I wrote your damn program.
Neither were you. Well, yeah, but we've been here a long time. And I go, what's the real issue? They go, well, he's from the military and we just don't like him. I go, I'm from the military. And they go, well, we don't like you either. Like, well, okay. But there was a natural bias against the military that overshadowed the individual, his capabilities, his competency, and they acknowledged he was capable, but he was military, and they would never, never agree to that. Now, the good news is it wasn't their decision.
Yeah, I'd have fired both of them. Like,
well, I went to our common boss. I said, just FYI, here's what we heard. And neither of those 2 folks stayed in the same roles.
Yeah, fair enough.
They both moved on to other things, but it's out there and it is real. And my advice, my guidance, my thoughts, my insights for veterans that face that is to either decide to stay and improve the situation or figure an exit plan.
Yeah.
Don't do anything rash, but figure an exit plan. So you leave that, because you will not change some of these folks. It just won't happen.
Yeah.
And again, I'm talking about the tip of the bell curve.
Of course.
This isn't everybody.
Right.
But it's out there. And sometimes folks go, service members go, I didn't realize that they love me. No, they don't. Not everybody. Some do.
Yeah.
So in any case, I get real passionate about
You
that.
said something in there that I think is important to touch on. And you said he's not from the industry. And I see a lot of that because I do cruise Indeed every now and again just to see what's out there, what I might qualify for if indeed I ran out of runway and had to go back to corporate America or whatever that case may be. And I see a lot of these job applications. They want 5 years experience in this for an entry-level position. And I'm like, how in the are we supposed to compete with that? So what is your advice on that? Is it finding a way to take all of that military experience that you have and translate it into that minimum number of years of experience for the position? What does that look like? How do you break through that kind of gatekeeping in a specific industry? Like, let's just say Adam here has found his passion. He knows what he wants to do. He's a go-getter. He's going to take action. He's going to drive himself around with his resume to all these places that fit that mold of what he's passionate about. How do I defeat that gatekeeping kind of element of these jobs?
Okay, so great question. Okay. Number one, employers have every right to require industry experience. They do. Okay. Employers in the civilian world have a different challenge than leaders in a military organization. The military can build their or has to build their talent, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we just can't go to a competitor and hire a lieutenant colonel or a
Right.
staff sergeant or a chief master sergeant. I mean, we have to build our talent, we have to build our leadership, and we have to understand what the route is from 1 to 2 to 3 to 9 to 10 and so on and so forth, right? The civilian world, we can go buy our talent. We want a new president of a business unit, we can go buy it. We can buy it from a competitor. We buy it from somebody that's been in the industry. We buy it from a company that does a similar functional thing that our company does, right? It's a whole different mindset. And when companies are requiring certain years of industry experience, they're doing it for a reason. They don't want somebody that's just good at the task. They want people that are good at the task in that industry. Okay. So
Mhm.
that's the employer side of it. On the veteran side, clearly you don't, unless you're going to a defense contractor that happens to be contracting in an area you worked in, you're not going to have industry experience, right? So that's when you have to default to the relationships, to the networking, because through
Mm.
the network and through the conversations, you begin to do what? You begin to share stories of your capability that starts to build credibility.
Got it.
Okay. So Adam comes to me, I'm the employer. I want at least 5 years experience as an operations supervisor in a automotive manufacturing plant. And then we look beyond that and, here's all the characteristics and capabilities we need you to have. Okay. We need good people skills and communication, decision making and problem solving and time management, conflict resolution, tick, 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 tick.
I got all
You,
those.
you've done all those. You haven't done it in automotive manufacturing. So what you do is you network with people to go, you know what? I don't really care that he didn't do it there. He was highly successful in an even more complex place. I want to bring him in.
Yeah, because I promise you, managing infantry privates is probably the worst thing on the fucking world. Automotive manufacturing is not going to hold a stick to that. Maybe I'd be surprised. It
No,
might
you
be
might be.
similar. Might actually be similar.
It might be similar. The big difference I'll suggest, and this isn't in every company, is they are represented by unions in many companies.
Mm,
Changes the environment totally.
right.
Okay, so that's another thing, and I respect your position, what you just said. But sometimes our veterans underestimate just how challenging things can be in the civilian world too.
Oh, for
And if
sure. And
and if and I know you didn't mean to by any means, but it does happen. I had a guy. I was teaching a class one time, and they were mostly it was EHC9s and O5s and O6s, right? In a particular community, and I won't bother to tell you where. And I was talking about some of the norms inside the civilian business world, and I was talking about problem solving. It's very different, the difference between rational and irrational decision making and all that stuff. And one of the gentlemen in the class, full colonel, who had been kind of giving me the um, kind of the hairy eyeball the whole class, kind of like, okay, Bill, really? He actually kind of raised up his hand. He goes, hang on a second. Any one of us in this room could solve any business problem day one.
yeah, that's a little overzealous, buddy.
So I said, okay, well, Colonel, let me give you a real business problem and you tell me the solution. I said, here's a business problem we need from a leader in an automotive manufacturing firm. This is a real problem. We need to figure out how to commercialize new hypoid gear designs for Class 8 trucks in the Brazilian market to get us at least a 12% return on our money. What's the solution? You have one day.
His jaw dropped, didn't it?
He sat there and he kind of thought, he tried to hide the fact that his jaw dropped. And he goes, okay, I need 2 days. So we
Yeah.
had a little fun with it. But if the employer that you're engaged with, interviewing with, networking with, gets a sense that you're minimizing the importance, the complexity, the challenge of the work that they're doing, they're going to think that's akin to calling their baby ugly.
Right.
And nobody likes that.
I
And that
take
will
your
cause
point.
them to go, thank you very much. We have things to do and they're important and hard
Yeah.
for them. May not be hard for you. May not be hard for me. But until we've established that credibility, we have to be mindful that this stuff is their livelihood, and we got to
It
be
all it all
respectful of it.
comes back to the network, like you said. Get out there
100%.
and make friends with people from all different industries because, like I said earlier in the show, you never know when you can put that person, pull them out of your back pocket, hit them up, be like, hey, man, I'm trying to do this. Can you lend yourself to making me credible for this role?
So a great story. There's a guy I knew. We met in 1990. We were at Officer Advanced course together in 1990 because I'm an old fart, right? He did some time in the special operations community, got out, I don't know, 10 years ago. He's now chief strategy officer for a government contractor in the Fort Liberty. It's Fort Bragg. It's always going to be Fort Bragg area,
Yeah.
right? So I'm coaching a current guy. And I said, what you do is kind of lined up with what this company. He goes, oh, yeah, I know the company. I go, I know the chief strategy officer. That guy now works for him.
See, testament to your network.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Yep.
So, Bill, tell everybody how they can follow you, follow your journey, get involved with the work you're doing for a veteran career journey, use your services through Kiefer and Associates if that's something that they're interested in for their business. Just give everybody where they can find you, my man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You can go to veterancareerjourney.org. That gives you an overview of what we do. It's got a little contact sheet thing there if you want to reach out through there, veterancareerjourney.org. If you want to email, it's bill@veterancareerjourney.org. I'm all over LinkedIn. It's William E. Bill Kieffer on LinkedIn. Those are the best ways to get a hold of me. I'll take a phone call even if somebody wants. 419-205-7072. If you call late at night, I won't answer. Leave a message. I'll call you back.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I give my phone number out, but that bitch goes on to do not disturb at 9:30 at night, so you ain't getting through after that. Ladies and gentlemen, and I promise you, Bill is an amazing dude. If you reach out to him, he'll respond. He answers. He's cordial. He's friendly. He's awesome. I mean, our first meeting was awesome. This show has been awesome. I hope that you had a good time. Please don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, download this, share this with as many people as you can. Help us reach 1 million veterans by the time I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025. We're saving lives out here. We're creating value and really helping those veterans who don't have to make the same mistakes that Bill and I made in our transition journeys. So, Bill, I really appreciate your time today, man. Thank you for being here. I'm glad we got to get this in with this hurricane going on, and I appreciate you, brother.
All right, brother. I appreciate it. You stay safe, okay?
Yes, sir. We'll see you guys next week, ladies and gentlemen. Take care.